Hi everyone, welcome to Ask a Property Manager episode number 46. Today is November 11th, 2020. Happy Veterans Day to those who've served. Thank you for your sacrifices. We're coming to you live from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, principal broker of Own Buffalo Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be discussing bed bugs, lumber prices, how to show occupied homes, and so much more. Before we jump into that, I want to give us a quick plug for our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager drop every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can find those live on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Buffalo4ClosedHomes. You can also find the replays on our Facebook page as well as over on our YouTube page, youtube.com/OwnBuffalo. You can find those the same day. Last but not least, don't forget to check out our Instagram over at instagram.com/OwnBuffalo. We do post a little bit different content there than what we would post on our Facebook and on our YouTube, obviously. So that's definitely interesting and it's worth checking out as well. Last but not least, don't forget that we do have the free 30-minute phone consultations. These can be a phone or a Zoom consult, whatever your preference. This is something that is going to be going away probably around the first of the year. So if this is something that might be of use to you, and there's no sales pitch on this, by the way, it's simply me trying to give back to the community. So if you have a question that you're not comfortable asking in the comments, or something along those lines, a situation you need help working through, definitely take advantage of those 30-minute phone consults. You can grab those over at ownbuffalo.com. There's a button that you can click that'll take you right to these pages where you can grab an appointment. You can see I do have a couple spots open this week and a couple spots open for next week as well. Don't forget the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drops every Thursday morning. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to be looking at how to handle rats, which is a fun one. The idea of sharing equity in a home with a tenant, which kind of a crazy concept, but I think we do a pretty good job of walking through it. And how to handle utilities when a new tenant moves in. So don't miss out on that. New episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drop every Thursday morning everywhere podcasts are heard. You can also see those over at rentprep.com/podcast. I wanted to show a little bit of humor before we jump into our news of the day. This was actually posted on the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group, and I just got a chuckle out of it. Here's another top 10 repair item. Drain clogged, so they bypassed it with beer cups. Level 9 on the MacGyver scale. That one's pretty unique. I don't think I've seen one quite that unique before, but it reminds me quite a bit of the when you've got the double sinks in Britain, where you've got two taps, one hot and one cold, people trying to find a way to mix them, like what we have here stateside. So you see people trying up all kinds of crazy inventions to make that work out. So kind of fun there, but I want to jump into some news here. And the first article I wanted to talk about, this one came via Housing Wire, and this one's pretty interesting. NAHB CEO on how the presidential election could impact lumber prices. We're pretty non-political on Ask a Property Manager as well as on the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. But I thought that this article was pretty interesting, not necessarily from a politics standpoint, but from just a cost of doing business standpoint. So we'll kind of get into this one a little bit. No matter who wins the presidential election on Tuesday, the National Association of Home Builders CEO Jerry Howard said that lumber prices might be a wash. Lumber prices have skyrocketed 160% since April because there's not enough domestic production, adding about $16,000 to the cost of building a new house, according to the NAHB. But the different solutions each candidate might apply to the problem would likely balance the other out. I think lumber prices would probably remain about the same, and I'll tell you why. If Trump wins, you'll see a bigger effort to open up domestic harvests in our national forest and in the private forests, but you probably won't see the conclusion to the Canadian stuff with the lumber prices. If Biden wins, I think you'll see more restriction on our domestic harvest. I don't know this for sure, but possibly he might be more amenable to dealing with the Canadian crisis. In September and October, builder confidence broke records, reaching 85 points in October, the highest score the series has ever recorded since its inception 35 years ago, and the second month in its history the score broke 80. Howard said that builder confidence could be affected by who wins the election, and the effects are likely to be outsized given such a polarizing election. So I want to pause right there and talk a little bit about the current lumber situation in case you aren't already familiar. And I know I've talked about this both on the podcast and on the show before, but it warrants reiterating. there's a huge supply chain shortage right now, and it's not just lumber, it's a lot of building materials. We're finding it in lumber, we're finding it in appliances, and things of that nature. But lumber seems to be one of the hardest hit industries, and a lot of the lumber that comes into the United States actually comes from Canada. So obviously with border closings and stuff like that, and then trying to figure out, okay, what are we allowing across, what are we not allowing across, you know, plant shutdowns leading to lost production. We burned through the backlog of lumber very, very quickly, and they've been trying to kind of catch up with that production ever since. Add to that the fact that production is at an all-time high right now, or demand is at an all-time high right now because of the amount of new builds that are happening and the amount of people who are taking on projects in their own homes to kind of spruce things up a little bit while they're working from home and things like that. There's been a major demand for building materials across the board. So that's kind of what they're talking about here. But I wanted to make sure that I had specifically mentioned that because they talk about Canada here. That's what they mean when they're talking about Canada. A large portion of our lumber supply does come from the Canadian side of the border. Continuing in the article, if President Trump wins, I think you'll see it continue to rise or at least plateau, and that's because our builders are very much pro-deregulation. They actually love what the president has done with deregulating things. I think it would be more optimistic with a second Trump term. If Biden wins, I think there's a very real fear that there will be higher taxes, that there will be a significant rollback of the Trump deregulation efforts. So I think you'd see a decline in builder confidence. Howard said with a Republican as president, there will more likely be serious deregulation, while a Democrat in the White House might mean a commitment in the form of subsidies and federal expenditures. I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, Democrats usually are more on the subsidies and federal expenditures. Republicans tend to be more deregulation. I don't think that that's really a shock to anybody. As for helping the housing inventory shortage, Howard said that both candidates are on track to remedying the historic shortage. If Trump is reelected, I believe you'll see him continue to try and deregulate all businesses in industries, including housing. That'll help with building housing, obviously, Howard said. If Biden's elected and his housing policy is a moderate one that is pro-home ownership as well as, and he's been talking a lot about housing, multifamily housing, rental housing for the lower income spectrum. But if you have a more moderate approach, then he can do something to help with inventories. I think that our builders are more inclined to believe that President Trump will be better for them in that regard, but it really remains to be seen. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure on that, to be honest with you, that last line there. And obviously here we're several days post-election. We have President-elect Biden getting ready to take the White House. At least that's the way it's looking like it's going to go right now. Obviously there'll be lawsuits and this and that and the other thing, whatever the case may be. As it sits right now, it looks like we're cruising towards a Biden presidency. And I think that if it's played right, I think that there's going to be a lot of capital expenditure in the affordable housing, the multifamily affordable housing specifically. I think you're going to see some new lower income developments springing up, which is not necessarily a bad thing, especially in the Buffalo market, because a lot of the stuff that we have in Buffalo is old and just, dilapidated, in need of constant maintenance and constant repair. And at some point, it almost makes sense to build something new to the current standards, to the current energy protocols, to the current building codes, and kind of move forward from some of that older stuff that is just in constant need of repair and upkeep. So I guess we'll see what happens moving forward. It is what it is in terms of where we wind up on this. I don't think that you're going to see a large dip in home builder confidence, at least not immediately. Because I think that there's such a demand for home building right now that I think that confidence score will remain pretty high. On to our next article of the day. This is actually a local article pulled out of Buffalo Business First. Buffalo is a hot residential real estate market for out-of-towners. We've definitely covered this topic before, so we're going to kind of breeze through here a little bit just so that you can get a feel for what's going on in the 716 area code. Brett Llewellyn has heard, is this really the price? Countless times in his career selling residential real estate. He is the residential division general manager of MJ Peterson Real Estate. It's not uncommon in a market where median single-family home was $189,900 in September, according to the Buffalo Niagara Association of Realtors. That's resulted in an influx of people interested in moving into the Western New York from outside of the 716 area code. Redfin, an online real estate brokerage firm based in Seattle, reported that since the pandemic hit, Buffalo's had the third highest gain in net inflow, the number of people looking to move in minus the number of people looking to leave. According to the study, there's been a 107% increase in out-of-towners looking to move to Buffalo. Only Santa Barbara, California, and Louisville, Kentucky had higher numbers. That's pretty interesting. I hadn't really noticed that. Or I shouldn't say I hadn't noticed that. We are seeing an influx of people coming into our market from outside markets. As a matter of fact, one of our clients, who is a property management client with us, they opted to make the move to Buffalo once they realized that their job was going to be full-time remote. They decided that they would much rather live here in Buffalo than in a major metro where they were living, decided to move into one of the vacancies in their building, and now they're self-managing their property. They decided to come back to Buffalo. They're from here originally, so they decided to come back home to Buffalo, manage their asset in-house, and just now that they're able to work remotely, it opened up that opportunity for them. And I think that you'll see a lot more of that as time goes on as well. The pandemic has really changed how people view cities like Buffalo, said Daryl Fairweather, Redfin chief economist. People do want to leave larger cities for a number of reasons. We're going to kind of jump ahead here a little bit. In Buffalo's case, it's worked out well because you were close to New York. It's almost like your economic sister. I think that as people are getting more settled in Buffalo, they're finding out what a great city it is. One of the things that I wanted to mention that's not in this article, when you talk about things like Buffalo being close to New York City, or even Toronto, we're really only about 2.5 hours from Toronto when the border is open. When you talk about the further expansion of things like a high-speed rail system, if you were to run a high-speed rail from Toronto to New York City, Buffalo would be one of the most logical places to put a stop. And when you have something like a high-speed rail and you can commute from Buffalo to New York City in a matter of 45 minutes to an hour, it changes the entire dynamic of how you live and work and operate. So I think that you're going to see a kind of, Buffalo's already been in a resurgence, and it has been for several years, in my opinion. Things have been exciting in Buffalo, not just from a real estate perspective, but from a business and economic development perspective for the last several years. And I have a feeling that that's going to continue even through what we're experiencing right now. Obviously, right now, Buffalo's taking a pretty big hit. Services are a huge industry here, and we're about to enter a period of time where we're going to be back to just indoor dining and reduced seating and this and that and the other thing. So we're going to take a hit in the short term. But I have a feeling that cities like Buffalo that used to be big, these Rust Belt cities, I have a feeling we're going to be big again, because we're starting to see more and more push towards smaller metros and things like that. And if you do get to a point where you have that high-speed rail, and I know that we're a long way off, but if you were to get to a point where you had that high-speed rail, it would really change the entire way that we live and operate here in Buffalo. One other thing that's not mentioned in this article, but that I personally wanted to mention, a statistic that I had seen, I'm not sure where, but it was something that I'd seen earlier in the last couple of weeks. Our inventory, our residential inventory is down year over year, almost 15%. It was just shy of 15%, like 14.5%, I want to say. Decline in residential inventory, which is also leading to number one, a drastic increase in price, because people are willing to pay more knowing that there's just not a lot of inventory out there. But number two, I think that that's also going to lead to the development of more homes, kind of leading back into our previous article where we were talking about lumber prices and home building and things like that. Buffalo is really starting to poise itself to be really right at the forefront of all that, which is pretty cool. Before we jump into our questions from housing providers around the country, we've got a little bit more humor for you. This one was also pulled from the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. I hired a handyman and gave him a list. When I got home, only numbers 1, 3, and 5 were done. Turns out he only does odd jobs. If that's not a bad enough dad joke, the comment underneath of it, you'll have to find a way to get even with him. I couldn't resist. I understand it's a dad joke, but I just could not resist that particular set of circumstances. So deal with it what you will. A little bit of humor to brighten your day up. Let's jump right into our questions from landlords around the country. This one comes to us from the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group and reads as follows. My parents' property manager has asked them to get a $1 million insurance policy and has asked that the rental company be placed on the insurance. Is that a normal practice? So yes, this is normal. This is what's called an additional insured, and I'll kind of run through a little bit about the additional insured and what it means and things like that. Keep in mind, I'm not an insurance broker, so you're going to want to talk to your insurance broker to make sure that you're doing what the property management company is actually requesting of you, so that everything is running smoothly. So jumping into this here, essentially what this boils down to is real estate has an inherent risk, especially the management of real estate. There's a lot of moving parts, ins and outs, fair housing concerns, and things like that. And your property manager is basically there to help you to mitigate and manage that risk. So in the event of a lawsuit, you want your insurance and the property manager's insurance to be able to present a unified defense. And one of the ways that you do that is by ensuring that your property manager is named as an additional insured on your homeowner's insurance policy. I'm sorry, on your landlord insurance policy. So your property manager is already carrying general liability, errors and omissions, workers' comp, whatever other insurance policies that they need to cover their operation. But generally speaking, that's only going to cover the property management operation. It's not going to cover property level issues. So your property manager is basically exposed to any claims that would be arising from your home. The additional insured essentially helps your property manager to mitigate the risk to them. And it's important for them to try to mitigate that risk whenever possible, again, because you want your property management company and your insurance company to be presenting a unified defense in the event that there was ever a concern or a lawsuit at the property. Here in the great state of New York, we practice shotgun law. Fire at everybody, sue everybody, and see what sticks. So that's really, one of the main reasons that we would go and ask for the additional insured, and we do ask for the additional insured on every management agreement that we set up. So it's getting to be more and more common in the industry that you're going to be asked these types of questions. Some insurers won't do this, and we found that it's more often than not linked to an incorrect policy type. You need landlord insurance. You need to make sure that you're putting the proper policy on your property for rental to make sure that the insurance company understands that this is no longer an owner-occupied home. This is now a rental income property. They need to understand that, and you need to understand that not having the right insurance in place puts you at an even greater risk than paying the little bit of extra to make sure that you are properly insured. So make sure that you've got the right insurance policy, get that additional insured in place to make sure that both you and your property manager are protected, and then make sure that you are all squared away. Your property manager will have the paperwork mailed to them and everything else. One last thing I wanted to mention is there is a difference between an additional insured and an additional interest. The additional insured extends the coverage onto your management company. An additional interest just lets the management company know when there's a change to your policy, or it expires, or it renews, or coverage is dropped, or something along those lines. They want the additional insured, not the additional interest. So hopefully that's of help to you. That's definitely something that's becoming more and more common. It's been common in the commercial real estate world for a long time. It's starting to make its way more and more into the residential world, and it is something that we ask here at Own Buffalo every single time that we set up a new account or take on a new property, is that we be added as an additional insured to that policy. So hopefully that helps. And then I would definitely say speak to your insurance agent to make sure that you have all of your insurance policies and things in place and in the fashion that they need to be. Let's jump into bed bugs. I hate bed bugs. I hate bed bug infestations. They're a nightmare to get rid of. They suck. There's no good way to handle a bed bug situation no matter what you do. So we have a landlord here out of Texas looking for some help. I have a tenant in a home that has been there for some 6 months. Now they have bed bugs. They're trying to say it's from the curtains left in the home. What are my rights? How have you dealt with this? I do not have the bed bug addendum, but I do have in the lease that the tenant is responsible for pest control. So that was actually one of the first things I was going to bring up is what does your lease say? But before you even get to what does your lease say, this is one of those things where you have to look at the state law. Some states do require a landlord to handle any pest infestation found at the property. So you got to check your state law and see if you're required to handle that pest infestation per law according to the laws in the state of Texas. I simply don't know. I don't live there. The next thing you're going to want to find out is, okay, let's assume that the law allows for the landlord to push this responsibility back to the tenant. My next thought would be, okay, what does your lease say? And you've already said in here that your lease does indicate that the tenant is responsible for pest control. So finally, I would look at timeline. So if this was a situation where the tenant had been in the home less than 30 days or something like that and was complaining of bed bugs, I would be more inclined at the 30-day mark or before the 30-day mark to say, all right, we're gonna spring for the treatment, or we're gonna split the treatment in half with you or something like that, unless the home had been previously vacant for like an extended period of time where bed bugs would not have been an issue. But keep in mind that bed bugs also go dormant. They hibernate when they don't have access to human flesh, if you will. I hate bed bugs so much. And it's actually, they're eating the dust and the dead skin cells and things like that. It's not so much, they will get on you, they will bite you, but more often than not, they're interested in dead skin cells and things of that nature. 6 months is a long time to be living in an apartment and suddenly spring up with a bed bug issue. I don't buy the fact that they think that it's the curtains. I just don't buy it. 6 months in, there would have been some sort of an indication well before now that there were bed bugs in the home. I have a feeling that this is a situation where this may be a tenant-caused issue that you're trying to put back on the landlord. And I think that this is one of those situations where you just have to follow your state law and follow your lease. And assuming that your state law is in agreement with your lease, push this one back on the tenant. One thing that you might want to consider is take care of the treatment yourself so that you know that the treatment gets done, and then back bill it to the tenant if your lease will allow for that. That would be something that I would strongly recommend, because at least that way you know that the treatment is getting done and getting done to your specifications and not just however the tenant decides they want to deal with it. So that might be something to consider as well. All right, showing occupied homes. Hello, my fellow landlords. How are you showing your units if you still have an existing tenant in the place? I won't be able to show it until the tenant moves out at the end of November. Have you done video showings? Any input would be greatly appreciated. So we, generally speaking, don't show a unit until it's vacant. We find that that's the best way to get the best possible presentation, especially in the last 30 days that a tenant is living in a place. They're packing, they have stuff in boxes, they have stuff thrown all over the place. They're already in the middle of a high stress scenario. They don't want you in that unit showing it while they're in the middle of trying to move out. And honestly, anybody that you're showing the unit to probably is not going to get the strongest possible impression of the unit with everybody else, you know, in the unit and all their stuff around. They're not going to be able to visualize themselves in the space. So we've taken to waiting until a unit is vacant to show it most of the time. If you do have to show it while it's occupied, a good recommendation would be get a good set of marketing photos. If you have a good set of marketing photos from maybe when you listed it the last time, don't be afraid to necessarily reuse those and point out anything that's changed in the listing description. So maybe you have an old stove in one of the photos and now you have a new stove. Mention in the listing description that the photo may not be current, but that there's a new stove or something like that. That's definitely something that you can do. We have done video tours. We actually do a set of photos and a video tour as part of our basic marketing package on every property that we list for rent. Very simple video walkthrough tour. You can record it on your cell phone, and that's more than sufficient. Just make sure you turn your phone sideways when you're recording. Nobody wants to watch a video like this. Turn your phone sideways, go ahead and record it, and it's super simple to upload a video to YouTube. It takes 2 minutes to set up a YouTube account and learn how to upload the video. If you can post a picture on Facebook or in a text message, then you can upload a video to YouTube. It's that simple. You don't have to go through and do heavy editing and everything else. Just do a simple walkthrough, voice narrate it if you feel like voice narrating it, and go ahead and post it online. That's a good way of being able to show people the unit without having to disturb tenants that may be living there. Something else that you may consider, and something that we do offer to our property management clients, is a 360 virtual tour. I'm actually going to pull one of these up on screen right now. This actually became huge for us when coronavirus first hit, because we were not able to get out and show. We were under restrictions from New York State. We couldn't get out to show what we wanted to show when we wanted to show it. So we were, operating with these restrictions. And we were one of the only brokerages in Western New York at that point that was using the 360 virtual tour for rentals. You see it quite a bit in the real estate side, like listings and sales, but not so much on the rental side. And we were super happy to be one of the first people, one of the first companies exploring the 360s for rentals. So this is one of the properties that we've done a 360 on. We actually did this for one of our clients after we went through and rehabbed this apartment. So all this flooring was brand new right before all of this was photographed. The paint is all fresh paint. We went with our landlord gray, or I'm sorry, our agreeable gray, not our landlord beige. From one end of the home to the other. We put all this new flooring in here on the first floor. Take a look at the kitchen here. And these cameras are increasing in quality all the time. It used to be that like a Matterport rig, which is one of the main places that does these sorts of 360 cameras, essentially. They were one of the first cameras in the market to do these 360s. They were like $2,500, $3,000 when things first kicked off. So it's definitely come down in price substantially. But guys, you can see just by walking, kind of walking around in this apartment with me here, you can basically get a feel for the entire space. Does it create a little bit of a perspective issue? Yeah. But you can get a feel for a space and kind of understand, okay, well, this is what a bedroom looks like. This is what the bathroom looks like. This is what's included in the kitchen. Things like that. So this is an option that you have available to you as well. Check your local market. There are a lot of places out there that will do these 360 tours and host them for you. And you basically get a link that you can send to people to show them the apartment in a 360 format. There are companies that'll do this for you, not necessarily connected to the real estate listings and sales things, and just, you can hire them as a private party, I guess, is essentially what I'm trying to say. But really cool piece of technology. This has definitely helped us drastically when it comes to how we are handling our showings and things of that nature. Helps people to see the place before they even come out. And actually, it's helped us to lease a couple of places before people have even come to the area. So it's huge. Having the ability to send somebody a video or a 360 V-tour, very, very cool. Definitely a great opportunity to get your property in front of somebody. So obviously, you might even be able to, you mentioned that you had an occupied apartment here. You might be able to schedule a time with the tenant to do an open house type thing for like a Saturday for a couple of hours where the tenants are out of the house and you can have people come through and take a look at it. Obviously, you need to be cautious given the current restrictions out there in the world. Follow whatever's applicable for you in your area and do what you have to do to make sure that you are operating in a safe manner. Your business depends on it. That pretty much wraps things up for this week's episode of the Ask a Property Manager show. Thank you all so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. I love producing Ask a Property Manager, and there's a couple of ways that you can help us to improve. Drop a question in the comments either on Facebook or on YouTube, and your question might be picked up in an upcoming episode. If you see something funny like the humorous images that we had on the show at the beginning, feel free to send those over too. I love highlighting stuff like that. It just helps to break up the monotony in an increasingly difficult industry. If you enjoyed this content or if we brought some value to your day, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us grow and reach more people. We'll be back next week, November 18th, that's next Wednesday, at 10 a.m. Eastern with a new show, another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.